This episode is brought to you by VPP Simplified. Now you can get element by element tracking and guidance for your VPP journey. Every aspect of the VPP requirements in one easy-to-use interactive spreadsheet. Achieving VPP star status can be tough, but understanding what it takes to get there can be simplified. This VPP Gap tool will help you do that. Go to vppsimplified.com for more information.
Welcome to the Safety Pro Podcast, where we help you manage workplace safety one episode at a time. And now, your very own Safety Pro, Blaine J. Hoffman.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Safety Pro Podcast. I am on the road once again in yet another hotel room. Hopefully the audio turns out okay. You may hear the occasional background noise, somebody shutting a door in a hallway. That's always fun. But hey, we're going to make the best of it, and we're going to go over an important topic, one that I've been wanting to get to, and that is electrical safety-related work practices. Now, OSHA's safety-related work practices standards, again, this is for the general industry, they're performance-oriented, and these requirements complement the existing electrical installation standards. Now, these work practice standards include requirements for work performed on or near exposed, energized, and de-energized parts of electrical equipment. The use of electrical protective equipment and the safe use of electrical equipment are also included. These rules are intended to protect employees from electrical hazards that they may be exposed to, even though equipment may be in compliance with the installation requirements that are in Subpart S, 1910 Subpart S, electrical standards. Now, when employees are working with electrical equipment, they have to use safe work practices. Such safety-related work practices include keeping prescribed distance from exposed energized lines. You get into, NFPA 70E, the whole arc flash standards with approach distances and things like that. We're not going to get into that in this episode, NFPA 70E. That's one, I'm going to do a whole separate episode on that one. But, those are examples of safe work practices or, safety-related work practices that you're expected to follow. This also includes, by the way, locking out and tagging equipment, making sure that equipment's de-energized and you maintain that, and control that energy, especially during maintenance. So all those are examples of electrical safety related work practices. We're going to get into all those. But first, let's take a minute and thank our incredible partners in safety, who'sonlocation.com. Look, go to who'sonlocation.com and learn about the services that they offer. If you are concerned with how to manage visitors, guests, contractors, even employees at your facilities or at your sites anywhere around the world, then go to who'sonlocation.com. Learn how you can protect the people and places that power your organization. Oversee people presence on site with visitor, contractor, employee, and emergency management. You can secure your site by, tracking who signs in and out and keep a historical record of site visits. You can keep your people safe, ensure all visitors, employees, and contractors have completed relevant safety procedures, non-disclosure agreements, things like that. And you can get valuable insights with this system. You can be empowered to make data-driven decisions based on valuable people presence insights. And lastly, and certainly not least, you could be in compliance. You can comply with safety and health regulations and protect those that are in your duty of care. So go to who'sonlocation.com, learn about the service, get a 30-day free trial. No strings attached, no credit card required. 30 days, get the trial, get started, see how it can work for you and your organization. If you decide to stay with who'sonlocation.com, all the information continues along as well. So the 30-day trial can translate seamlessly into the full service. So again, who'sonlocation.com. Go check out what they have to offer for you. Great partners in safety for the podcast. And let me know if you're doing a trial or if you've already using Who's on Location. Send me a note. Let me know how it's working for you. I can pass all that information on to the fine folks at Who's on Location. They love hearing from podcast listeners. Next, of course, the official floor sign, floor marking company of the Safety Pro podcast, the incredible folks over at Mighty Line Floor Tape. Go to mightylinetape.com/podcast, get a free sample of their incredible floor tape. I'm telling you, people don't think about this. You've got to mark your floors, your manufacturing floors, warehouse floors, freezer floors, doesn't matter. They need to be clearly marked, right? So you need to use the best possible marking solution. If you're painting your floors, knock it off. Go to their website, look around. Also, they have a YouTube channel. They have a video comparing, side-by-side comparing, painting your floor, all the prep work, cleaning, getting the paints out, rolling the paint, masking off the area, peeling the masking off, back off, moving everything back into that area versus using Mighty Line tape. So what makes Mighty Line floor tape different? One, the beveled edges, that increases durability for forklift traffic. Incredible for that. Look, peel and stick adhesive, very little residue left behind, so it's easily removed as well. It's 7 times thicker than the average floor tape. It's all made right here in the USA. So what else could you ask for? Go to mightylinetape.com/podcast, get a free sample sent directly to you, try it out for yourself. There's a reason why Mighty Line Tape is the official floor marking floor sign company of the Safety Pro podcast. Again, mightylinetape.com/podcast, get a free sample sent to you. Okay, so let's get into, the scope of what we're talking about when we say electrical safety related work practices. Now, there are training requirements that apply to any worker that faces a risk of electrical shock that is not reduced to a safe level by the electrical installation requirements found in 1910.303, and that's through 308. So employees in occupations that I'm going to name for you, they face these types of risks and are required to be trained beyond the 1910.303 through 308. So we've got blue collar supervisors. Think about this. We've got supervisors, we have training for our maintenance technicians and maybe even some engineers, but the blue collar supervisors, they often get overlooked. So don't forget those in the training requirements for safety related electrical work practices. Okay. What about electrical and electronic engineers? So don't forget your interns either. Very, very, very important interns. As a matter of fact, what better way to introduce interns that are finishing up their college career, getting ready to launch into their actual career by, starting off with safety. Obviously electricians, but industrial machine operators. If you're at a facility that you allow the actual machine operators to disconnect, not using the machine controls, but if they think there's something wrong, or maybe they do some light maintenance work in place so that you relieve some workload, off of your maintenance crews, then you're going to need to train those folks on proper shutdown, lockout, tagout procedures, make sure that they're, they have the right PPE, they have the right uniform, that's FR rated potentially, depending upon what type of equipment and disconnects we're talking about here. So don't forget your machine operators. Material handling equipment operators, dealing with, certain material handling equipment that may need to do some work. It could be electrical in nature, pallet jacks, loaders, but then you have these, especially in warehouses, you have these devices that are used that are built in and used similar to an overhead crane, so if they're going to be doing any kind of maintenance or inspections in those pieces of equipment, you're going to need to make sure they're trained as well. You got mechanics, folks that do repairs, even painters. They may need to, think about this. Painters have to remove light switch covers, panel covers, electrical outlet covers, 120 volts, right? More people are killed on 120 volts than any other voltage. So it's a combination of, it's the most common voltage that we're surrounded by, and that folks often have sort of this misconception that it's low voltage or lower voltage. I mean, it's 120 volts, right? 30 amps, 15 amps, that can kill you. And it does. So, don't forget your folks that do painting and do some remodeling work. Riggers, we've got welders, all sorts of employees that you may not think about that need electrical safe work related practices, the training for those. Okay. Now remember, like electricians and welders, let's set those aside for a second. But workers in the other groups that I mentioned, they don't need to be trained if their work or the work of those they supervise does not bring them or their employees they supervise close enough to exposed electrical parts or circuits operating at 50 volts or more to ground, okay? If they do work in proximity to that, then that is a hazard, an existing hazard, and you have to include them in that training. So bottom line is, like, do an assessment. If employees are going to get work in close proximity to or be exposed to an electrical hazard, a live electrical component operating at 50 volts to ground or more, then they have to be included in the training for these safe work practices. Now, the provisions of the standards cover electrical safety related work practices for both qualified persons, okay, those who have training in avoiding the electrical hazards of working on or near exposed energized parts, as well as unqualified persons, those with little or no such training, and that could be working on or near, any of the following installations that I'm going to name here. Premises wiring. These are installations of electrical conductors and equipment within or on buildings or other structures, and they're on other premises like yards, things like parking lots, or other types of lots or industrial substations. So if you've got anybody working on or around premises wiring, what would be considered premises wiring, they would need to be included in this training. Wiring for connections to supply. These are installations of conductors that connect to the supply of electricity. Anybody working in or near or with those types of installations. How about other wiring? These are installations of any other outside conductors on the premises that if anybody's working with or around or exposed to those types of wiring, they're not covered and guarded, shielded appropriately, they need to be included in this training. But then you also have optical fiber cable. These are installations of optical fiber cable where they are made along with electrical conductors, something else to consider. So if you have folks working like maybe telecom, IT folks, things like that, there's another one I should have included in the group, IT professionals. They're up on a scissor lift, right? And they're up in the rafters in an industrial site. They're pulling IT cables and all this stuff. They could be exposed to bus bars up there. They could be pulling stuff around, working around cranes that are live. Just don't forget these folks. There's also covered work by unqualified persons, right? So those standards cover any work performed by unqualified persons that are on or near any of the following installations: generation, transmission, and distribution installations, right? Or distribution of electrical energy. And that includes communication and metering that are located in buildings used for those purposes or that are located outdoors. How about communication installations? Installations in vehicles. Think about ships, watercraft, railway, rolling stock, aircraft, automotive vehicles, other than mobile homes and recreational vehicles. Those folks could be exposed to electrical hazards and we don't even realize it. Keep in mind, if a qualified person is performing work near one of those three types of installations I just named, and the work is not actually being done on or directly associated with the installation, then that work is covered under the safety-related work practices. So safety-related work practices for electrical, they're found in 29 CFR 1910.331 through 335. And there are some definitions that they list in that standard that you may need to be familiar with. One, barrier. That is a physical obstruction intended to prevent contact with equipment or live parts or to prevent unauthorized access to a work area. De-energized. I often find that folks think they know what de-energized means, but there's a misconception about it. So according to OSHA, the definition is free from any electrical connection to a source of potential difference and from electrical charge. That is what OSHA considers de-energized. There's also disconnecting means. That is a device or group of devices or other means by which the conductors of a circuit can be disconnected from their source of supply, physically disconnected. Not just switched off, but it's still physically connected like a light switch. It has to be physically disconnecting. Energized is electrically connected to a source of potential difference. That is considered energized. Exposed, as applied to live parts, means capable of being inadvertently touched or approached nearer than a safe distance by a person. It is applied to parts not suitably guarded, isolated, or insulated. So anytime you have those, you have an exposure. Live parts, those are energized conductive components of any machine or equipment. And then, of course, I touched on this earlier, qualified persons. That is one who has received training in and has demonstrated skills and knowledge in the construction and operation of electrical equipment and installations and the hazards that are involved. So let me run down the summary of requirements for this section. Now, in general, the standard requires covered employers to provide appropriate training to both qualified and unqualified employees. You have to determine who they are. Go back to what I said earlier. Do a hazard assessment. Talk to those that perform work. Do job observations. Make sure you understand what your employees have to do. Also, provide effective safety-related work practices to prevent electrical shock. Your policies and procedures should reflect some of the requirements found in this standard, some of the ones I'm going to be talking about. You can incorporate those into your safety manual. De-energize live or energized parts operating at 50 volts or more before employees work on them. So make sure you review your lockout tagout procedure and policy to make sure you at least incorporate this in there. Provide suitable safety-related work practices for employees working on energized parts. So have a energized or live work permit process. Make sure they have the adequate PPE and training that they don when working on or troubleshooting live parts. And remember, the PPE has to be at a level that if they put the PPE on, it's to the level that that would be similar to if it were de-energized. Does that make sense? So you don't just put on safety glasses and some, nitrile gloves, when working on something live. It may require, an FR-rated suit and face shield and insulating gloves. So make sure you do your research on this part. If employees are going to work on live parts because it's absolutely necessary, if you do have to work on something live for troubleshooting, you have to don PPE. So don't skip that part. Treat de-energized parts that have not been locked out or tagged as they were energized. That's something you should always include in your training and your policy and procedure. Place a lock or a tag, or actually both, on parts of fixed electrical equipment, their circuits that have been de-energized. That's something you're definitely going to want to do. Maintain a written copy of lockout tagout procedures. Has to be documented. Determine safe procedures for de-energizing circuits and equipment. Get with your engineers, your maintenance, and also get with the manufacturer of all this equipment, because they're going to have specific procedures on how you shut this stuff down and work on that. Also covered how you're going to release stored electrical energy, which may endanger personnel. Things like capacitors that hold energy, pressure, steam, hydraulics, even gravity. Okay, that gets us to the next one: a block or relieve stored non-electrical energy in devices that could re-energize electrical circuit parts. So Make sure you cover all these in your lockout tagout procedure, your work practices, general policies and procedures for the site. Place a lock and tag on each disconnecting means used to de-energize equipment. And if you can't physically lock something out, again, OSHA says if it can be locked physically, you're expected to. Some folks just try to throw a tag on there, right, with a zip tie. But make sure a tag is used when it's used without a lock, that it's supplemented by at least one additional security measure that provides a level of protection equal to that of the use of a lock. And a lock is, let's go the other way. A lock may be used without a tag if only one piece of equipment is de-energized and the lockout period does not extend beyond the work shift, and employees exposed to the hazards of re-energizing the equipment understand this procedure. So, rule of thumb, if you throw a lock on something, you better have a tag on it identifying who the individual is and the work that's being done. Also, make sure that you only have the lock and tag be removed by the employee who applied it. So that's key. Don't use these common locks. We call them shift change locks. Those get commonly used or misused in areas where we should be using lockout tagout locks. Folks will just put a generic, what they call a shift change lock on there that the supervisor is supposed to control during a shift change. And the reason why this comes up is because let's say you have first and second shift. You got first shift maintenance is working on a machine, they're not done, and second shift is going to come and finish up the work order and do the work. But there's no real overlap between these two shifts. So what will happen is a supervisor will come along and put his or her shift change lock or supervisor lock on the machine, and then the first shift maintenance technician splits, takes their lock off, goes home, and then second shift comes and puts their lock on. And what you're supposed to have is a actual physical handoff of that energy, of that lockout. You're supposed to actually physically meet, talk about the work that was being done, where you've left the work, look at the machine and the equipment in general area, and then the person that's coming on has to put their lock on first before the other lock can be removed. So that's typically how it's supposed to happen. So you can use an intermediary as long as the intermediary has been trained, is qualified to perform lockout tagout. So make sure you strictly adhere to that. Make sure you provide necessary shields, barriers, or insulating materials so employees can avoid contact with exposed, energized parts in confined or enclosed spaces. So you're going to add an additional sort of hazard, if you will, by putting these things, this type of work, in a confined space. Prohibit the wearing of conductive jewelry and other items if the person might contact exposed, energized parts. Also, don't allow any housekeeping duties to be performed around live parts. Visually inspect test instruments and equipment before they are used. So, and of course, it goes without saying, don't use defective equipment, but have all of your voltage meters and everything, have them tested and certified. You'd be, no pun intended, but you'd be shocked to find out how many mishaps and fatalities actually occur from voltage meters that aren't rated for the work that's being done, and they explode. Maintain all PPE and other tools in a safe, reliable condition and inspect or test periodically. So PPE is important. Make sure they have a safe place to store the PPE, and make sure you get a PM schedule set up to inspect and have those tested, especially dielectric gloves or insulating gloves, have those tested. There are testing, facilities that will do those. A lot of shops just find that every 6 months they just buy a new pair of gloves for one or two maintenance folks. If you don't have a large crew, it's cheaper to just buy them every 6 months instead of sending them off to be tested. Always require guarding to be put back in place, when normally enclosed live parts are exposed for maintenance or repair. Make sure when everything's done, you put everything back together before you take the locks off. Make good use of safety signs, symbols, or accident tags as needed to warn other employees about possible electrical hazards. You don't know how many times I've come around a corner in my career. I've come around a corner, walking through a shop, and there's just a panel open. And clearly there's a tool bag on the floor, and maybe the electrician or the maintenance worker had to go get something. They just left it. No guard, no barrier, nothing. So, make sure you do that. So use barricades in conjunction with safety signs when necessary. Also, put an attendant out there to warn, of danger if signs or barricades aren't enough. Or if you're going to leave it unattended, have somebody there, have an attendant there to make sure nobody gets into that area. Look, I wanted to get a quick one out to talk about safety, electrical safe work practices. This is something that it'll open up the door to get into NFPA 70E and some other type of work practices that we can get into. But look, it was a quick rundown on electrical safety related work practices. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've got all these things covered in your safety manual, policies, and procedures. Hopefully it's at least given you an idea of maybe there's some other folks that work for you that need electrical safety training that maybe weren't included in your original training. So go out, do the hazard assessment, conduct some job observations, ask maintenance folks, what types of work they do on machines and equipment. Ask operators what types of, maintenance they do on machines and equipment. You might be surprised. So, that'll help strengthen your safety training program, and you can include more of these items in that training. So, hey, shoot me a message, info@thesafetypropodcast.com. You can also go to thesafetypropodcast.com, see the full list of, electrical safety related work practices that OSHA calls out. I'll have them posted there. They're also in the show notes. Be sure to visit our partners in safety, who'sonlocation.com and mightylinetape.com/podcast. Let them know that we sent you. And until the next Safety Pro podcast episode, probably from the road again, yet another hotel room. But hey, until then, be safe.